solution. So yes, we can earn money, and our estimations are, for sure, it depends on the plug time. You can serve your vehicle into the market. You can earn several €100 for your vehicle a year.
In theory, V2G plays a crucial role in the decentralized grid of the future. It'll provide grid flexibility in a power mix mainly consisting of fluctuating renewables. Also, it provides great potential to have end users participating in the market. However, we've been talking about it for years already, and we are still waiting for it to materialize beyond specific pilot cases or insular solutions. So where are we with V2G in 2023? How close are we to V2G becoming a daily reality? Which regions in the globe are leading the way, and which obstacles do we still have to overcome to realize its full potential? We'll find out in this episode. Welcome to the Smartery podcast, a podcast for and with the creators of the new energy world. A world in which energy will be renewable, decentralized and digital, bringing together electricity, heat and mobility. Let us show you how we will get there and who will get us there. In this episode, I'll have the pleasure of talking to two experts at the same time, Dr. Stefan Perras and Thomas Gereke of Siemens. Stefan is currently heading the pre-development and innovation team at Siemens for e-mobility and working on new innovative charging solutions. And Thomas, on the other hand, is global head e-mobility practice. So let's get it going. Welcome, Stefan. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Well, I like to say it's a little bit like waiting for Godot, that famous play by Samuel Beckett. Every time there's like a Smarte E event, there for sure is also a talk about V2G, but it's always super exciting, an absolute relevant piece of the grid of the future, but we never really get around to be talking to realized business models, etc. So what's your impression right now, spring 2023? Where are we with V2G? Are we finally getting closer to it really being a business case and being a technology that's adopted beyond certain projects?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of pilot cases getting realized around the globe, more and more to come. And so you gain a lot of experience with that. So that's a good thing. However, on the other side of the coin, there's still a lot of regulatory topics to be solved. We have a very fragmented regulatory world out there. And last but not least, also the technology needs to come into place, which is the vehicle and the charging infrastructure. So we see more and more vehicles coming with bidirectional capability, being vehicle to load, so direct power outlet, or vehicle to home, vehicle to grid capabilities. So hardware in today, I think more than 35 models we have already in the market that are capable hardware-wise. So they will get software updates soon to enable that. And we'll see a lot of bidirectional charging stations as well coming into the market the next years. So yes and no. So we'll see experience, we'll see pilot projects, but there is no mass rollout yet because all the preconditions are not fulfilled so far.
We'll dive into that in just a second, but just for that very unrealistic case that some of our listeners have not yet heard about V2G. Thomas, what are we talking about exactly? How big is the amount of power V2G potentially could be providing? What are the benefits in general?
That's a very good question. I think if you see it from the theoretical point of view, what is the capacity of battery electric vehicles? For example, in Germany by 2022, it was roughly 1 million electric vehicles, and the capacity of this battery for battery electric vehicles is roughly, or was roughly 53 gigawatt, and for the plug-in hybrid roughly 11 gigawatt hours. What means this? The total amount of the normal hydro storage capacity was 39 gigawatt. So already by 2022, the capacity, I would like to call it theoretical or brutto capacity, was higher and from the higher hydro storage solution. But I think what already Stefan also mentioned, we need to consider, is it possible to get access to this battery capacity? And I think there are some regulatory aspects, but also technical aspects we need to consider. And also we need to consider, for example, have you access to the complete battery, because we need to consider the motivation from the EV driver, because what is the impact on the battery lifetime? But already there we know if you're in an optimal range of the so-called state of charge SOC between, for example, 40 and 60 or 20 to 60 or 20 to 80%, the impact on the battery lifetime is really what we know so far, and not so it's minimal. It's not so big impact. But on the other hand, we need also to consider what is the benefit, what is the overall benefit for vehicle to grid. And I would like to distinguish here between the private user, for example, if you have your own garage, maybe with a PV on top and own storage. So really to be independent in the future, reduction of cost. But on the other level, also to see it from a commercial point of view. If you have a location owner, you would like to avoid grid connection costs in the future, because it's not only electric vehicles, we will see also more heat pumps consuming more energy. And then also see it on top level for the power utilities, for the DSOs and TSOs, distribution and transition service operator, to stabilize the grid, to avoid grid constraints and also peak shaving. So that's a huge potential, I think, and it will be a huge challenge also from the society, from the regulation point of view, from the technology to support this new technology here.
Now, Stefan already mentioned that it's quite a scattered landscape when it comes to regulation. What kind of picture are we looking there at? Because I guess it really varies depending not only on the region, but also on the various countries. So which of the regions globally at the moment seem to have really the whole situation between technology, business case, and regulatory framework sorted out the most? So which regions do you see with the biggest potential? Is it Asia? Is it EU? Is it the Americas? I just read an article about actually China and Nigeria collaborating on electric bus fleets in the future. So maybe even Africa. What do you say, Thomas?
I think also you need to consider always both elements. You need electric vehicles which have the technical capability to have vehicle to grid technology in place. And the other hand, also the charging infrastructure need to be implemented. But in my opinion, it's always coming from the motivation. And in my opinion, it will be countries with a very high share of renewable energy sources, because I think it makes absolutely sense or it's a perfect fit, in my opinion, renewable energy sources like PV and wind combining with electric vehicles to store the energy if you have the surplus energy in the grid. And for example, if you see Denmark have more than 64% already last year by renewable energy wind parks. And I think countries with a very high renewable energy share supply, they will have the high potential to introduce it very fast, I think. But then again, it's depending also on the electric vehicles and the complete charging infrastructure, if this is already implemented here.
Stefan, what do you say specifically in regards to regulatory or technological questions?
Yeah, as I said, it super differs across the globe. I mean, Japan started more or less as a pioneer with the CHAdeMO standard being already bidirectional capable, and the Nissan vehicles. So that were basically at the forefront. And now we see is here in Europe, a lot of movement on the regulatory side, as well as on the United States side. And Europe and the United States are also both leading EV market sizes with the vehicles coming into place. And within Europe, unfortunately, we don't have a harmonized world. And if you want to be active in the V2G market as a business, especially in an international level, that you have to understand all these different bits and pieces on the regulatory side, and they are also changing very quickly. So if you think you have understood the thing, and then the politicians come around and change certain things. Fortunately, there is harmonization going on, especially here in Europe. They're trying to harmonize grid codes and a certain market, especially in the balancing market, certain rules and access to the market. So it will make things easier in the future. But still, if you want to really understand the whole regulatory topics from pre-qualification, how you act on the markets, how you can make money out of it, that's basically a big PhD that you have to write to get along with that. Here in Europe, I would say Germany is quite advanced in terms of market access. The Netherlands is also very attractive in terms of access, also from the EV potential. And just recently, the United States just catched up with the direct demand response programs, where you can already participate with 100 kilowatt hours of capacity to trade on the market. That makes it a bit easier for actors to enter the markets there. It still differs in a nutshell. You have to understand the different local requirements, but it's getting better soon, hopefully.
You mentioned that there's a lot of different regulation around it that have to be considered when building a business case. Are there also various technical approaches Is there like a difference whether I'm focusing on AC or on DC? What's the picture there, Stefan?
Yeah, that's a big religious question. So we digged into that a bit into details. We did surveys with OEMs, car makers, to understand, is it the AC bidirectional world or the DC bidirectional world? Just in a brief, if you want to discharge AC wise, you have the converter basically on the vehicle and the onboard charger, and then you have a rather cheap AC wall box that basically does then the bidirectional power flow into the house. And for DC, it's different, and the power conversion is done on the DC wall box, and you save some costs on the vehicle side for the onboard charger. There's pros and cons to both worlds. What we see is that here in Europe, it's definitely going to be a DC bidirectional attitude and approach. In the US, it's a kind of a 50-50. Some OEMs go for the AC route and some go for the DC route. The AC route is also then coming from, because they're in the United States, they look for backup power, so vehicle to load functionality, and therefore you need an onboard charger that is bidirectional. So it makes sense to then do also the vehicle to grid in that manner. The DC wall boxes so far were quite expensive. So if you look today into the web shops of these worlds, you spend around 6,000-7,000 euros for such a DC wall box. That won't be the case in the future. So also our company is working on a product. You see the power electronics getting cheaper and cheaper out there, and with more integrated products, basically you get cheaper prices, and this makes the DC wall box more attractive at the end. And that's what we are seeing. And also what you should not underestimate is the whole grid compliance topic. And this is, again, the fragmented world out there in especially Europe, where basically every local distribution system operator has own grid codes that you have to comply with. And if you want to do AC bidirectional charging, your car has to cope with all these different grid codes, because the car is not stationary, it drives around. So that's the big challenge. Still there's standardization ongoing, how to handle that one. Technically it's feasible, but it's not super easy.
That sounds really like a task and job specifically for the OEMs, because they have to make a decision what route they go. I guess it's not like they can come up with a specific solution for each country. They probably want to standardize and scale. So that really sounds like a headache, to be honest, at least from a manufacturing side. Is there anything we need to still be talking about in regulatory aspects, Thomas, or do we have a complete picture already?
No, I think Stefan mentioned it right well. I think it's one point is from the technology point of view, also from the charging standards, AC, DC, but then also the different plug types like CCS, CHAdeMO, GBT we need to consider, and these need to be fulfilled from the OEMs. But I think the biggest issue is really the grid codes. And Stefan mentioned only in Germany we have more than 800 DSOs. So since they have all their own grid codes, it's only Germany and see it Europe. So I think this is the biggest issue and challenge we're seeing in the future from the grid point of view. Here, it's in my opinion the topic we need to focus on.
And also control-wise, if you want to steer the vehicle or the charging from a DSO perspective, these protocols, you can steer the car, you can steer the charger, you can steer the smart meter gateway directly. So the different, say, entry doors to that, and this has not been agreed upon, which will be the predominant one. And what the protocols, there are a couple of protocols out there. Yes, they have been all demonstrated to work technically in these different pilot projects that I mentioned, but there is no common agreement. I'm just coming from a V2G conference last week here in Germany, and it was exactly the hottest topic. We need to agree on these protocols and the standardization. And here in Germany, we are super lacking the rollout of the smart meter gateways, which is a must-have or prerequisite to participate in these different V2G markets and to make money out of it. And we are not there yet, unfortunately.
How important is it then for all the various players and stakeholders to really come together as an ecosystem and agree on the technology or the market that's to be developed? And who needs to be on board in that discussion?
Yeah, super important. You need to join forces to force basically regulatory bodies and initiatives and politicians to come up with these rules and regulations and enable basically the market for the different industry players. If we are not pulling on the same rope, still face this fragmented world, which we need to avoid. We need to harmonize, we need to standardize. This will, in my eyes, be the only enabler. That's the only prerequisite that I think that is hindering still the market penetration.
Now, when you just mentioned how difficult it is, specifically in the BEV section, I assume that there's a different significance, whether we're talking about private electric vehicles, company electric vehicles, or community fleets. I guess the latter most likely is the most obvious and easy to tackle implementation. So do you have like a percentage attached to it? I guess community fleets are easier to implement, but then there will be a much larger number of private electric vehicles in the future. So how do you weigh these various use cases?
I mean, I think we see both things. So for sure, I mean, as we have to transform the whole mobility sector, so also we see a lot of EVs in the private sector for sure. And the question is, how can these private owners participate in these additional revenue streams? You can participate on the energy market and you basically use the arbitrage of the different prices. You can use dynamic prices. You can do surplus charging of your PV storage application, and so on and so forth. And then there's the whole balancing market, which is a bit more complicated. As a private owner, you have to go through certain aggregators and so on, which is a bit more attractive for the commercial fleets. I mean, just imagine, I mean, look at the United States. They have these school buses. They are electrifying them now. These school buses, they operate in the morning. This big yellow buses everyone knows of. And they operate basically at noontime when they pick up the children and drive them home. But the rest of the day, these buses stand still. They are not really utilized. So it's a big potential for them to integrate these batteries into the vehicle. Or just think of a logistic company that is delivering parcels, and they are not doing any job on Sunday. So they're sitting with thousands of these vans in the depot, not utilizing their batteries. So there's a big use cases. The whole logistics sector, where competition is very fierce, they really look for getting the total cost of ownership down. So I was surprised when talking to a truck OEM, because I thought trucks, they're always on the road. But especially distribution trucks, they have a quite significant time where they don't operate, or they stand still for loading, unloading, or just for resting. And they are very plannable times. So these logistic companies, they very much look into how can they make additional money out of their capital expenditures with their trucks and make use of that one. So we get a huge demand currently from truck OEMs for bidirectional depot charging. So that's a use case. Basically, you can start from A and go to Z. It's plentiful, and each of them with different challenges. And the thing is, what always we get a question is the battery degradation. So yes, we can earn money, and our estimations are, for sure, it depends on the plug time. You can serve your vehicle into the market. You can earn several €100 for your vehicle a year. And the question is, how much battery degradation do I suffer, which I have to basically counterbalance for that. And as battery technology gets better and better, that's yes, you have some degradation. I mean, anyhow, I have the degradation by time, which you can't stop. You can put it in good temperature mode, but you will have also cyclic degradation. And we did some analysis on that. And if you do the discharge in a certain amount of state of charge between 20 and 80%, it's not that much over lifetime. So it's definitely not eating up all the benefits. What's eating up the benefits is really the regulatory things like the double taxation and that we still have in place. This is the regulatory side. But battery degradation is not much of a deal for bidirectional charging anymore.
I would like to add also exactly what Stefan mentioned. I think the first use case will be for a private EV user, because then you have the own location, you can use it. And then really this commercial fleets. And the commercial fleets, we need always to consider when the cars are on the road. So when we use the cars for the utilization, and then when we have time to use the electric vehicles, the batteries for vehicle to grid, and exactly what Stefan mentioned during the weekend, also clean e-bus initiative in US we are seeing right now, also during the daytime. And the issue is always, if you feed it into the grid, the regulatory aspect we need to consider here.
So there's a huge potential. It's also obviously very attractive, the example you set with the school buses, because you know exactly when they'll be standing still. I mean, you know, it's like a clockwork. So also very attractive, as you mentioned, to bring down the costs for the owners of large vehicles. But whom would you see emerging as actually the players that will take the biggest piece of the cake? Do you think it'll be OEMs? Do you think it'll be the vehicle owners? Do you think it'll be player in the middle, DSOs, completely new players coming in from the outside? Is there already like a trend emerging where you see those guys are really the closest to figuring out the business case?
And that's a value chain. And first it starts with the vehicles. They will sell their vehicles with that capability of bidirectionality. Then there's the charging hardware, which we are a provider of. And then there's the upstream value chain. First, you need these kind of aggregators that aggregate different charging fleets. Why that? Because you need to have a minimum aggregated amount to be able to trade and to participate in these markets. And then you have the traders at the end that basically do the trades on these markets. So that's basically the value chain. And what we are seeing today already, especially in the upstream business, like these new aggregators and these traders, they are more and more coming into place. However, they, in most cases, specify and focus on a specific region because it's super complex, as I mentioned. So they pick a region that is attractive. They understand the regulatory aspects. They pre-qualify there. They make their local contracts and they know how to do it. And you see only rare companies that are really working on a national, even international level because it's super fragmented. So I think it's still, as long as we have this fragmented setup, there will be local players, little startups, and that they see their benefits there. But at the end, it will be a split value chain. I don't think that we'll see a vehicle OEM that offers also charging and does the aggregation and trading by itself. So that will be a sliced cake at the end.
That's very interesting because, of course, the more often you slice the cake, the least attractive it gets for the individual players. Add to that the challenge that you mentioned is very fragmented and you can't really scale it globally with one size fits all. So I guess that's probably one of the hurdles also that needs to be overcome to build solid business cases. So we've talked a lot about really the intricate challenges that need to be solved to realize that full vision of mobile storage playing a huge role in the energy grid of the future. So let's end on really on the vision to know why we really will head into solving all these challenges. You ran a case study in Munich, how actually the scenario could look like in 2023 if we sort out all the regulatory issue, this taxation issue, and one or the other technological issue. What would be the most interesting outcomes? What scenario could we be looking forward to, Thomas?
Good question. So what we have found out in this study was, first question is how many electric vehicles we will see in Munich by 2030. And right now we have more than 500,000 vehicles in Munich. And by the forecast, what we're seeing today, we will have more than 160,000 electric vehicles in Munich. And then we need the differentiation between private vehicles and also commercial vehicles, because what we analyzed also, how many vehicles we will have who have the capability and how many have access to charging infrastructure, so home charging, and also how many people will have access to work charging, because the important issue is by vehicle to grid how long time you have access to the battery. So that's the most important result. I think we need access to the battery, and it makes no sense if the car is only connected for 50 minutes to the charging infrastructure, because we can forecast when we have the renewable energy surplus. And the result was really that we have roughly 200 megawatt capacity from total 1,000 megawatts. So it's 20% from Munich we can support with vehicle to grid technology by 2030. So it's a huge amount, huge share already. And the potential is there. And it's
just to understand that correctly, you're saying 200 megawatt is the energy need of the city or the need for buffering?
It's a peak load we can support.
Peak load.
It's
okay.
A peak load. It's not the battery capacity. It's a peak load we can support, and that was the result of the study. And it's roughly 20%. And in this, we have already considered how much is the SOC adoption, and also how many people have access to charging infrastructure. So I think it's very practical. It's a netto capacity we have assumed here. And it's only one example. And I think it shows what the potential is there. And therefore, we need really going forward to define the regulations that we also can use this huge potential for vehicle to grid in the future.
And adding to that, what Thomas said, I mean, the plug time is exactly the decisive one. So when are these vehicles plugged in? And if you drive an EV, you don't plug in your EV every day. Hybrid, different story, but I plug mine in every every week, only once. And so it can only participate in that charging session, then also to discharge electrically. So because people are lazy, as we all know, so what will help also in the future is this inductive charging, this wireless power transfer topic, when also vehicles become more and more autonomous, because you're standing all the time above this charging pad and you have a connection to the grid all the time. And 98% of the time, a vehicle is standing around, what the statistics show. So that is also something that will support V2G quite significantly.
And again, I guess that really comes down to educating the owners. But as you mentioned, potentially owners could see like a 600 euros return. So that means if you don't plug it in daily, but you're somewhere between 2 and 5 euros per plugging it in. So that should be a little bit of motivation, I guess, to people really getting it there. But yeah, that's really interesting because it really means it has to be attractive for the owners. And they, of course, also have to feel confident and safe that the battery is not degrading while they do it. So it's a big communicative challenge, I suppose. Thanks a lot for really taking me down the rabbit hole and shining a light on where we are at when it comes to V2G in 2023. Some things have already been happening, but it sounds like really the big challenges still have to be cracked. So thanks a lot, Stefan. Thanks a lot, Thomas. And hopefully we'll get closer to that big vision in 2023 soon enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
For more information on V2G and bidirectional charging, visit Power to Drive Europe, the international exhibition for charging infrastructure and e-mobility. Power to Drive Europe is taking place from June 14th to 16th at Messe Munich. Tickets can be found online at powertodrive.de.